we really have a distinguished panel with two foreign ministers acting. Moldovan Foreign Minister Mihai Popșoi, and I'm happy to see him here in Odesa. Thank you for joining us. And Pavlo Klimkin, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine in 2014-2019, and the person who really understands what's going on in Moldova and who will provide us with strategic overview. So, Pavlo, thank you for being with us. We have Sergiu Ostaf, who is policy analyst from Moldova, born in Transnistria, and of course it will also help us to understand. And George Scutaru, head of New Strategy Center from Romania. It's definitely should not be possible to discuss future of Moldova and Transnistria without Romanian participation and input. And I also will have not only moderate discussion, but maybe sometimes contribute to it. I was also born in Moldova by chance and cover Moldova and Transnistria for quite a few years. So let's first indicate rules of this discussion. I would like not to have long lectures. It's better to have a dialogue and also dialogue with those in the hall. So please prepare your questions. And now I'm going to ask like focused questions to every of panelists. Then maybe we'll have a second turn, and then we turn to you. Please ask what you need to know about Moldova. We have due to plan 1 hour and quarter, so I will try to not to waste any time. So let's go to our key guest, Mihai. Let me be tough. We know that currently leadership of Moldova is not so hesitant is hesitant and not so fast to propose solutions of Transnistrian issue, Transnistrian conflict, no matter how you say that. Do you see that there is a way to see initiative in Chisinau?
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back in Odessa after a very, very long time, and it's a great opportunity to see many great friends, including Sergiu, Sergiu Sidorenko, Alexei Goncharenko. I have very fond memories of Odessa back when I was a kid. One of my very first travels abroad, so-called abroad, was to Odessa, and it pains my heart to see now that we end up in a situation where a region that had so much potential has to face now the highest kinetic war since Second World War. And the Russian aggression against Ukraine is felt very much in the Republic of Moldova, and we remain firmly committed in doing everything in our power to stand by Ukraine, to continuously help Ukraine, including by supporting Ukrainian refugees in Moldova, of which we've welcomed the highest number per capita. We provided temporary protection measures and integrated our Ukrainian friends in provided access to labor market, education, healthcare. From our modest means, we're trying to be helpful because we know for a fact, and it's not at all abstract to us, that Ukraine's courage and the sacrifice of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian army is keeping Moldovans safe. So we are going to remain steadfast in our commitment to help Ukraine despite our modest means. And this also connects to the Transnistrian region, which the Kremlin has created in the early 90s as a way of maintaining control over the Republic of Moldova and managing and undermining our sovereignty, our independence, and keeping us hostage. The unsolved frozen conflict in the Transnistrian region is meant by the Kremlin as a mechanism of limiting Moldova's sovereignty and undercutting Moldova's ambitions to return to the European family of nations. But regardless of those attempts, we are firmly committed to finding a peaceful solution to the Transnistrian conflict. And I would challenge your claim that we don't have a clear strategy. There is no other strategy than the Transnistrian region being reintegrated in an independent, sovereign, unitary Moldovan state. Full stop. Transnistria is a part of the Republic of Moldova, and it will remain so. And there isn't little discussion to be had when it comes to the process itself. If you look now into the data, the Transnistrian region is exporting now over 70% of everything they produce to the European Union. They are barely exporting anything to the Russian Federation or to the community of independent states. What an oxymoron. There is very little community and hardly any independence allowed to its members. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So we are now trying to exit. There is a hard work to be done with the hundreds of agreements there. But the Transnistrian region is an integral part of the Republic of Moldova, and we are committed to a peaceful solution to the conflict. And quite frankly, there isn't really much of a conflict. The citizens, the Moldovan citizens, over 90%, about 95% of the Transnistrian residents are citizens of the Republic of Moldova. There is no conflict. We have absolutely no conflict with them, and we never had. It's just an artificial construct by the Kremlin to limit Moldova's sovereignty. And it's all the more cynical that the Kremlin has been so adamant about the notion of Moldova's neutrality, promoting Moldova's neutrality status as another way of limiting our sovereignty, while they are the only ones who have been violating Moldova's neutrality for the past 32 years by maintaining troops and munitions in the Transnistrian region. So we have a clear strategy when it comes to the Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova. We are in the process of reintegrating the region economically, and the European accession negotiations are opening enormous opportunities and creates a strong pull factor for the business community, but also for the average citizens in the region. And we're already seeing important steps in a positive direction. Just the other day, Tiraspol Transgaz registered in the Republic of Moldova to be able to function properly as an entity of the Republic of Moldova. And we are continuously engaging with the folks on the left bank to maintain stability, to avoid any escalation. And you have seen attempts by the Kremlin to create trouble there, to create escalation. We're working hard with the folks on the left bank to keep things under control, because frankly speaking, and this won't be a revelation for you, even the folks in the Transnistrian region want to have less and less to do with the Russian world the way they've seen it unravel in Ukraine. The way the Kremlin chose to showcase and promote the Russian world in Kharkiv, in Mariupol, in Bucha, in Irpin, Moldovans everywhere, including in the Transnistrian region, and even some Russians, many Russians, in Moldova and in the Transnistrian region, don't want to have anything to do whatsoever with this fuzzy idea of the Russian world. More and more realize that the future of the Republic of Moldova and of the Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova is and should be and will be in the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihai. We will elaborate on topics that you have proposed to us, let's say, and I would ask Sergiu to comment. what do we really see in Moldovan society regarding the attitude to not just to Transnistrian people, but to resolution of this? Because as far as I know, you are not able to broadcast your presentation, but you have shown it to me, and it looks like a cardiogram, at least for recent years. How do you see, where does it move? It probably works. Just
okay, that's a great question. We have to look at the situation of perception of how the Transnistrian issue is handled in Moldova, at least from two perspectives. One, what people think, what is their perception, and then what responsible decision makers think through and develop approaches, hopefully alternative, to try this one, another one. The foreign minister, Popșoi, was saying about one of the ways of doing that. That's a valid exercise of thinking through. It doesn't mean that there is another one. There is no other options of doing that. But of course, the important idea is that the decision makers, the expert community, national, international, should explore different options. And there should be a meaningful debate and discussion about how to approach this issue. That also impacts and influences the public perception. Because there were few of the meaningful exercises in debating this issue, not, throughout long period of time, not to disregard the drawbacks from the past. Therefore, the public perception is influenced directly by this absence of meaningful discussions and exploring different alternatives. And therefore, the Transnistrian issue is very low on the public preference. As you are saying, the public shows that, it's been down from like the third place, some like 15 years ago. Now it's something like 8th or 9th place, very low in the perception. And perhaps 15–20% of the people would really care what is going on there. But public perception is not about coming up with the solutions. It's on the shoulders of the decision makers and those who are taking responsibility for the future of Moldova, integrating Transnistria in a meaningful way that helps Moldova's Euro-Atlantic choice and also a sustainable process of reintegration of Transnistria, so that the Russian influence, either military, economic, because we know, Foreign Minister was saying rightly about the attempts to integrate some of the economic Russian assets in Moldova, in Transnistria particularly. That's one way of doing that. But there are also lots of the threats, and we know of the experience in Europe, in different places, specifically where small states are being, by the Russian economic assets, subverting the democratic process. Moldova now is voicing lots of concerns related to how malign influence of Russia is going on in Moldova through economic assets that they created and operate fully, like Lukoil, like Gazprom, like lots of different retail systems that use cash to finance and destabilize the situation in Moldova. So getting more of the Russian economic assets in Moldovan ground play, that might be also a threat. And therefore, I should also challenge one particular view about integrating it fully in such a manner that you legalize and legitimize some of the Russian assets in Moldova if they reside jointly in Transnistria and Moldova. And for the intellectual discussion and drawing on the experience from other countries, we should also give a try to explore this issue from a different perspective. So that's kind of the first try that I'm giving to this exercise.
Just if I may, a short clarification. According to what you see in polls, would people be ready to accept solutions which are proposed by ministers, so that Transnistria joined Moldova not just legally, but de facto?
Well, obviously, this is the final idea that all of us dream about. So to have Transnistria integrated meaningfully without Russian assets, either economic, military, or KGB, or political representation.
And people would support that.
Yeah, and I think, as I was saying, unfortunately, the people understanding of the complexity and the alternative approaches is very low, given the fact that the intellectuals, decision makers have not explored these issues to depth and have not given the opportunity to most of the people to think through these ideas. Therefore, it's the perception and the idea about this issue is very low, less than 10-15%. Otherwise, the peaceful way of doing that is also a valid option, and I think it's the best. But there should be other alternatives also thought through, how to make sure that integration is meaningful and sustainable, and not just inviting through the back door the agents of influence, and that later will explode or destabilize, inviting basically through the back door Russia into the process of integration.
George, I would ask you to follow up what Sergiu just said about economical, let's say, dimension. Because we cannot integrate Transnistria back to Moldova if the issues that connects Transnistria with Moscow are not solved. And what connects Transnistria with Moscow the most now is energy. It's about gas supply to Transnistria, which comes from Russia for free, and it's about energy supply from Transnistria to Moldova. Do you see a perspective for this to be solved in foreseeable future? It doesn't.
I tried to take the mic from the minister. It was impossible. Okay. First of all, Alexei, thank you very much for this great opportunity to build up together a platform to enhance the knowledge and strategic thinking about the Black Sea. And it's very important to see around us very good experts. And I'm pretty sure that all of us, when we come back to our country, will continue to convince how necessary it is to support Ukraine. It's mandatory for all of us. And I'm grateful to you and to your colleagues for this initiative. Regarding the questions, indeed, we mentioned the presence of Russian troops, but I think the other main problem from Moldova is the Russian blackmail on energy field. And this vicious cycles, because Moldova is receiving electricity from Kuchurgan power plant with very low prices, but based on free gas from Russia. An entire philosophy of existence of Transnistria is based on free gas from Russia. And I think it's necessary to cut this circle. And first of all, and I'm speaking from Romanian perspective, in 2027 Romania will be the largest gas producer at EU level, because we'll start to extract our gas reserve from the Black Sea offshore area. We'll have capacity to assure 7-8 billion cubic meters per year. Just to compare, Moldova has 1.5 billion domestic needs per year without Transnistria. Indeed, we'll have possibility to cover entire gas consumption of Moldova. But on the other hand, it's necessary to think that about the revenues which are coming from Kuchurgan power plant, from Râbnița metallurgic plant, to Transnistrian budget. And it's necessary, and I'm pretty sure that after Moldovan elections, after Romanian elections, because you know in Romania we have this year parliamentary election, presidential elections, it's necessary to come with a new commission to think about a real plan, how we can support Moldova to absorb this shock on social term, because it's necessary, okay, if you substitute the gas, the electricity, because in 2 years Moldova will have electricity from Vulcanești, Tisacea, high voltage line, from Suceava, from Romania to Bălți in the northern part of the country. First of all, I think it's necessary to cut this malign influence on energy. And EU, first of all, and Romania, and as Mr. O'Brien mentioned, in the United States, we are very committed to continue support Moldova and to cut this malign influence on the energy field. Because if you have a large kinetic full-scale war against Ukraine, in Republic of Moldova, you can see a Russian hybrid full-scale war against this country to try to disturb and to undermine the path of the Republic of Moldova to EU together with Ukraine. It's necessary to support Moldova, and it's necessary to continue to support Ukraine, because, and as Romanian, we have to have an Ukraine integrated in Europe. And we want to have a good neighbor. We want to have a freedom, independent, democratic Ukraine, member of EU and NATO, part of the same world. And for us, because you mentioned this security dimension before, for us will be a strategic neighbor to see Russia on our border, on the Danube mouth, or even on the Prut, because I'm pretty sure if they will have the possibility to occupy Mykolaiv, to occupy Odessa, they will come to Danube mouth and they will come to the Prut River, and they want to occupy the Republic of Moldova also. And for this reason, it's necessary to support Ukraine, to avoid this nightmare scenario, and to continue to support the Republic of Moldova.
Thank you. Pavlo, I would ask you to comment on Ukrainian approach towards Transnistria, because the same way as in Moldova, we see, well, there is a certainty about unified Moldova in the very end, but there is no enough understanding of ways to reach that. In Ukraine, we have different voices, different approaches in Ukrainian political circles. What can be done by Ukraine? And we even have heard some voices supporting Ukrainian, let's say, army entering Transnistria. Do you see that this scenario can materialize one day? Do you see that this scenario is still discussed, or it is forgotten and left in the past?
Hi everybody, it's good to see such a crowd Saturday after lunch. Organizers already can claim a kind of success, actually keeping this crowd, and I mean it almost literally. And good to see such a good panel to discuss. Look, couple of days ago, one of my good American friends told me a kind of joke about American tourist kind of lost his way somewhere in Massachusetts, coming to a small farm and asking for a way back to Boston. And farmer saying, look, you are in the wrong place to start. So in a way, we are in the wrong place to start. But and let me make 3 short points just to start our good discussions. We don't have post-Soviet space anymore. It's over. With our war with Russia, with what's happening in Caucasus and Central Asia, it's definitely over. But we still have post-Soviet conflicts. One of them, Karabakh, had been blown out. In what way? But really, status quo is fundamentally over. But this status quo is still there in Transnistria. This status quo is a fundamental threat to actually Moldova national security, how I, as Ukrainian, understand it. It's a fundamental threat to our national security, you know, to have it and to keep it as a sort of Russian enclave. But it's also the same fundamental threat to the European security, whatever security model we're going to have in the future. So we can't tolerate it. So the status quo, which we have now, we have to sort it out. We have to repair it. Point. In what way we can discuss it, basically why we are here. But to have it like that is a no-go. No way. We simply can't start reasonable accession negotiations without having a strategy on how to transform, to reshuffle Transnistria. And it's not just about Moldova to care. Of course it's about Moldova because it's about Moldovan sovereignty and territorial integrity, but in the future European Union it's about everybody. My second point is about is about European Union, and we are about to start, hopefully, technically, politically, in some moment in time, pre-accession negotiations, whether it's in 2 weeks or in 4 weeks or in 2 months, it's important, but at the end of the day, we will. And I believe we have to use this point in time, even now, even before the whole results of the European elections gonna be coined in a kind of different reality. We have to start working on a sort of strategy on Transnistria as a part of our integration in the European Union. For us, it's clearly also about NATO. As Georgia said, Moldova has its vision here. But we can't simply say, okay, let's play with the status quo and not addressing the issue of Transnistria. And my sense, why not to start thinking about how to approach it from the point of where we can discuss these issues. It's still, at least theoretically, 5+2 existing. For me, it's not just on a lifeline, not brain dead, as Macron famously branded NATO. For me, it's dead, and we have to say it. Whether it's politically tricky or not tricky, we have to say it. It's dead, guys. Over. And we have to use this moment in time on started pre-accession negotiations and to say, okay, it's Moldova here, it's Ukraine here, European Union, and we have to extend this point to Transnistria and say, look, guys, it's now about you sitting with us in whatever format we can come up with and talking about your future, because your future is fundamentally different from your present. And we have to say it. It could sound kind of provocative, and it is. But without pushing this very simple message to the guys there, and I believe they gonna be receptive. They are receptive already in a very fragmented way, understanding that this Russian enclave as a part of the future European reality and future European security model is a kind of joke. And of course we can't simply impose all of the issues on them. We need to, as I've said, reach out to them and say, guys, let's talk. But it's about you, it's not about the Russians. It's about you, Transnistria, and I'm not gonna diminish the sense of complexity about Transnistria. It's not about black and white, and we all know it. Everybody sitting here and a lot of people at the end of the day. So we need to come up with a different sense, with clear political message, both from Kiev and Chisinau, and of course, not just from Brussels, but from a lot of our friends. And for me, status quo is really over. It should be the sense of our message, because many, many years ago, when I was humble student of physics, my professor on quantum mechanics told me a story about Albert Einstein having an exam and distributed different tests. And one student said, but professor, these are the same tests you gave us 2 years ago. And Einstein said, fine, but the answers are different. So we have to say to the guys, the answers are different. And you have to live with that point.
Pavlo, let me ask you to shortly focus on military scenario. Is this on the table? On Ukraine, from Ukrainian side of you?
We have to be smarter than just, trying to come up with any military scenario. I believe we are strong enough to I mean, it's not politically correct, but I would say, impose in a kind of smart scenario in order to integrate them in Moldova, not in a military way, but with all kind of understanding that we have to be smarter. I can't exclude fully, because of the future, any sort of scenario with the Russians would probably try to provoke there, and we have to be ready. So let me rephrase, Sergei. It's not our main line, it's not our priority, it's not our strategy to push for any military scenario. But if the Russians would be trying to play their cards, we should be ready for any sort of development in the future. We should be strong enough to say, guys, we are ready.
Thank you. Mihai, let me focus on a bit different topic. In some ways, Ukraine also have a chance to learn from Moldova in terms of conflict resolution. And one of these ways is about interaction between societies on two banks of the Dniester River. How do you see, what would your government and what would Chișinău do to make this process as soft as possible? Do you see that something have to be tackled? Do you see some issues that are still unsolved? Like, for instance, I expect that issues that are connected with social revenues are definitely something that needs an attention. What are the key problems that you expect to see?
Well, one of the biggest stumbling blocks, and among friends here we can be frank about it, was the open border of the Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova with Ukraine. Now that is no longer the case. For many years, Odesa port was the window to the world for the Transnistrian region and everything that implies, which I won't go into too many details. Lately, we've managed to address that. Moldova and Ukraine, thanks to the great partnership and great political relations that we now have, we managed to close that loophole. The Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova now, the border, the segment of the border with Ukraine, Ukrainian and Moldovan customs authorities control everything that goes in and out. So that is a game changer. There is no longer a status quo. The status quo has changed significantly in the favor of positive, meaningful, peaceful reintegration. That is an important aspect. The second, probably even more important aspect, will be the energy aspect. And there is already significant steps forward. As it was already mentioned, Moldova no longer imports gas from Gazprom. Moldova is no longer buying gas from Gazprom for almost 2 years now, which felt impossible a few years ago. Now it is a reality. The Transnistrian region of Moldova still does. And when the free gas to the Transnistrian region stops, the music stops. Because a lot of the industry there depends on this indirect subsidy of free Russian gas. We are looking into all those contingencies. We are absolutely not interested in creating any difficulty for our citizens there. We don't want to create any hardship more than the Russians have already created to all of us. So we are looking into all these contingencies, and we are working with our partners, with Ukraine, with Romania, with the European Union, United States, to be ready for any contingency. Of course, we are building the high voltage line to connect ourselves to the Romanian energy grid, that is to the European energy grid, to diversify further our energy options. We're investing in renewables. But we are also looking into what reintegration entails. On the economic side, on the social side, also on the reintegrating the security sector, which is the most difficult aspect. You cannot take it lightly. This is a big vulnerability there. But what is a game changer and a shift from the status quo is that we are examining those questions. We are giving a hard thought to these issues, as opposed to past 30 years when the modus operandi was us asking the folks on the left bank, do you want to talk political settlement? They would say no. The folks in Chisinau say, beautiful. Let's go back to business as usual. Now, it's no longer the case. There is meaningful discussion on our side what reintegration entails. This doesn't mean that it's going to happen tomorrow. This doesn't matter that it's going to happen the day after tomorrow. But we need to be ready. We need to have our ducks in line, so to say, to make sure what the financial cost is, what the security implications are, what the technical challenges are, and we are working hard with our partners to have the answers ready for all of those questions for when the international circumstances align for us to be able to capitalize on that opportunity. And we have the openness from our friends and partners in Kyiv. We certainly have all the support from our brothers in Bucharest and the partners in Europe and over the Atlantic to prepare for when that moment comes. And that moment will come. Because economically, the Transnistrian region is firmly anchored onto the European market, just like Moldova is. And it might be a surprise for you, but the Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova is actually exporting to the European Union with Moldovan customs stamps. I mean, it's also Moldova exporting, but just for the sake of making this differentiation, the region is exporting a few percentage points more to the European Union than the rest of Moldova. The Republic of Moldova is exporting about 65% of what it produces to the European Union, or 67 probably, and the Transnistrian region slightly over 70%. And when we were starting to negotiate the DCFTA in the early 2010s and when it was signed in 2014, the Transnistrian region was very adamant to make sure that its business interests are represented when we're negotiating the DCFTA. I am more than sure that now, as we are going to start the negotiations for Moldova's accession to the single market, there's going to be a lot more incentive on the left bank to make sure that their interest, but broadly speaking, Moldova's general national interest, is represented, and for the Transnistrian region to be even more anchored onto the European market. So there are important game changers happening, and we count on our partners continuously supporting us in being better prepared for when that moment comes for a meaningful, peaceful reintegration. And we are encouraged by what we hear from Kyiv, certainly from Bucharest and all of our partners in Europe and across the pond. And we are doing the hard lifting, the heavy lifting in Moldova to make sure that when the moment comes, we're ready.
Thank you. I'm really happy to see that our panel reflects what was said before. So starting from status quo, we have a discussion about that, energy and so on. And now, George, I would ask you to reflect on what Pavlo Klimkin have just said, that 5+2 format is dead. I fully agree. And I'm happy to hear that in Ukrainian authorities, there is an understanding of that. But what comes next? Do you see a role of Bucharest to take part in further format, or it stays as 1+1, which is de facto the only format which still has place?
If you remember, Romania took part in the beginning of the format in '93, but now I think, as you mentioned, 5+2 format it's obsolete, and it doesn't work. And I can imagine to see around the same table an Ukrainian diplomat and Russians, and to discuss peaceful about the Transnistria reintegration process. Of course, Bucharest is involved to support Moldova, and will support and will continue to support the reintegration process of Transnistria. As you mentioned, you can have enough tools of energy field, but also in Brussels. advocating, and I think to contribute to have a common plan together with you and the United States and with Ukraine regarding Transnistria, because the closest states, NATO and EU states to Transnistria is Romania. And what's happened in Transnistria is affecting also our security interest. And I think it's obvious for me the outcome of the reintegration process of Transnistria depends on the outcome of the war on Ukraine. And for this reason, because the consequences will be very different. In case of Ukrainian victory, we'll have a very smooth and faster process. I don't want to believe what's happened if you have the worst case scenario. And I mentioned this scenario to see Russia on the Danube Mount. And if you have a frozen conflict, will be very difficult because Russia will have enough instruments to try to influence what's happening in Transnistria. First of all, Russian troops, but also they have plenty of network of KGB, of GRU and FSB agenture there, and they will try to undermine this process. On the other hand, I think it's important to support Moldova, maybe to enhance the tempo, because, okay, I understand that it takes time, but it's not a similar situation like in Romania. Okay, we have elections, and maybe we have a social democrat government or a conservative government, but we are very committed to continue to be member of NATO and EU. And it's not the case in Republic of Moldova, because in Republic of Moldova, finally, it's about an option to be with Russia or to be with EU. And it's very important to support Maia Sandu, to support Maia Sandu government, and to support democratic process in the Republic of Moldova, because this will be a guarantee of a successful reintegration process of Transnistria. Look what's happened in Gagauzia. Gagauzia now it's taken over by a criminal structure led by Ilan Shor, and now the most sensitive spot area in the Republic of Moldova is not Transnistria, it's Gagauzia, and because Russia is trying to undermine the democratic government, the situation in the Republic of Moldova, using this criminal structure of Ilan Shor, and not only. And I think it's necessary also to show our commitment and to have a clear plan. I'm very agree with Pavlo. It's necessary to show to Brussels that you have to have a very clear path regarding the integration process of Transnistria. It's maybe it takes time, maybe not, because it's necessary to accelerate the process, but it's necessary to have a clear plan, clear resources, and a very good political commitment, not only in Romania, but in Paris, in Berlin, to support this process and to show Russians that we are committed to stop them in Ukraine and to stop them in the Republic of Moldova.
Thank you. Before I pass the floor again to Sergio and Pavlo, I'd like to remind that the hall would be the next to ask. So please indicate to me, like raising hand, that somebody is going to ask a question. And now I'd like Sergio to comment on, let's say, expert community perspective. Of course, it's difficult to prognose and to judge which ways of reintegration of Moldova are feasible. But anyway, are there some thoughts? Are there some discussions?
That's a good question, and I can tell you that there are different approaches in handling and meaningful reintegration of Transnistria. The well-thought analysis and evaluation of the proposed by previous governments or current government way of reintegration has been given, and if to paint several conclusions for this exercise, it most likely will result in an exercise where the pro-Russian forces will be aided economically sufficiently. There would be a consolidated network of the pro-Russian assets and agents within the Moldova, acting in a democratic space, imported with the process of mostly formal reintegration, and then they will start kicking, playing the political games within the Moldova, and in a cycle time, it will basically become a nightmare to manage, as we can see in some other countries. The discourse, the public discourse, including now, is that we can handle this. I doubt it heavily. Let's just reflect critically on the fact that the Tiraspol gas is legalized and it can import freely from the European market gas, including through the deals and brokers from Russia.
But not for free.
Let me continue this idea. Some of this cash will go, we know where. It basically enables some of the actors to play even more ably on the Moldovan, and with money, influence on politics comes. That was explained one more time with Shore and the like. I can give you another example, how we could be able to handle networks of agents and assets in Moldova, whether it would be possible to manage. So we can give and continue this kind of exercise of giving a chance to this strategy to unfold fully. And I can tell you there are lots of risks and threats. And I'm totally not sure that Moldova is capable of giving a meaningful reintegration going this way only. And now answering your question, are there any other options? And you put to Pavlo Klimkin a question whether there is a military intervention option valid.
Please close the mic.
I can tell you that we should not think in black and white terms. There are definitely other ways, going middle way, in a smart way, where the threat of the military capability is shown, but there is more targeted actions on some of the actors, and allowing, let's say, Russian assets, economic or others, just to be reintegrated in the Moldovan political space, economic space. This is not the right way of doing. That's for sure. It won't work. I mean, let me give you an example. You've said that I was born in Transnistria. Indeed, my father was a mayor of one of the Moldovan villages, and we were forced out of our home. And I remember that I slept 3 or 4 years with the steel metal in my window for years because of our position on the process of the slow. Taking control of the region. At that time, Transnistria region was, taking over, just like it happened in Donbass, like just happened in some of the, green soldiers and the like in Crimea. I can tell you that they are capable of outplaying in such a manner, and they're very sophisticated in playing and outplaying through economic means, political means, and the like. We should not underestimate the capacity of GRU and other Russian intel to outplay the politicians, much less experienced, and those who are changing each 4 or 5 years in Moldova. So there should be more of the thinking of not going black and white way, but more intelligently and smart way, using the military capability as a threat, at the same time reintegrating economically those assets which are not feeding into the pro-Russian political forces, cutting the influence of those economic assets which are basically camouflaging themselves but playing according to the Russian rules on the Moldovan market. That's all of the things that should be explored more, and the decision makers should really be more inclusive in discussing these issues and not blocking these kind of discussions out of the public space. This is.
Yeah, thank you. Pavlo, I would ask you to comment on the topic which you were focusing on for years, European integration, which is definitely a choice of Moldova, of Moldovan government, of Moldovan people, but is it possible to reach success on this path while Transnistria is still not under control of Chisinau? Still occupied, I would say, how it really takes place.
No.
Easy answer.
Look, let me say 2 sentences. Because I pretend to understand the Russian leadership thinking, both on NATO and the European Union and our both European and Euro-Atlantic integration. And before the Maidan, there had been a lot of guys in Europe talking to me and saying, Pavlo, you know, NATO is the reddest of the red lines, like Bill Burns famously put it. But EU, maybe Putin can tolerate your EU integration. It's something else, kind of Finnish model. Let's talk about it. And my point was it's the same, because it's not about security perception. It's about fundamental perception in their heads that there is no Ukraine. It's either Russia or anti-Russia. There is no way of thinking in a different way at the Kremlin. So now, with all kind of discussions around our NATO membership and all the problems and challenges, whatever, I believe it's the same challenge to get us into the European Union. It's the same, the reddest of the red lines in Putin's head. So fundamentally, they will do pretty much everything to disrupt our European integration and to weaken up the European Union. But now I would go further. I believe that the same stance towards our friends' European integration fundamentally exists at the Kremlin. It's the same stance that Moldova going into the European Union with all peculiarities of the Moldovan position on the security and NATO. It's the same red line. It's probably not the reddest of the red lines. You know, I can't, look through a sort of Putin's mind here, but Moldovans' European integration, it's definitely the red line. So for me, you can't effectively deliver European integration without a proper security model. Point.
Thank you. So now it's time to pass mic to the floor, to the hall. So yeah, please. I would ask you to introduce yourself and to indicate to whom you address your question.
Thank you very much, and to all of the panel for sharing those insights. Craig Oliphant from London, from the Foreign Policy Centre, and I've got probably a couple of questions to the Minister. I mean, the issue of networks, referring to FSB, SVR, GRU as a threat was there. And I just wondered if, first of all, you could also comment on your assessment of the Russian military presence in Transnistria. Is it too complacent to view it as a largely homegrown component, which has a vested interest probably with family members, etc., in keeping things stable? Maybe that is too complacent of you. But I suppose the second one, and it's interlinked, I just wondered if you could share your thoughts on the recent joint statement made by the UK, the US, Canada, about an elevated threat from Russia in meddling, and I suppose particularly looking ahead to the elections. Just if you could, as I say, further elaborate on how you see prospects for the elections in the autumn, and particularly with regard to Gagauzia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does it work?
It should.
Super.
It does. Well, first, with Gagauzia, the fact that the Kremlin is trying to instrumentalize and weaponize the Gagauz autonomy is a testament to their desperation and their inability to do the same to the Transnistrian region. Because if they could, they would not have gone to the lengths that they do in the Gagauz autonomy. when it comes to the joint statement, first of all, it's a clear sign of solidarity of our partners in the US, UK, and Canada, but it's also true of our partners in the broader Euro-Atlantic community. But it is also equally a testament of how aggressive and how active the Russians are in employing their hybrid tactics in Moldova. I've said it before, and it's hard to be proud of it. Moldova is a petri dish of Russian disinformation and Russian hybrid tactics in Moldova. And the more equipped we are to withstand that influence, the better it is for our partners, because then these hybrid tactics will not be taken on the road in the next election in the free world. So we are very encouraged by this position, by this strong show of solidarity. But it, of course, goes far beyond words and beyond political statements. The level of support that we've received in the last 2 years from the United States, from the European Union and the member states, and beyond in the free world, has made us a lot more resilient, not just in the energy sector, but also in the defense, in the security sector, broadly speaking. Economically, we're getting out of very difficult times with the high inflation. Now things are stabilizing. So this support is meaningful, and we'll continuously work with our friends to make sure that that we continue to capitalize on this support to continuously boost our capabilities.
Mihai, if I may, I would follow up to a question of population of Transnistria. Well, in Gagauzia we see a totally, well, not, I would not say pro-Russian, but currently not understanding the future of Moldova, like tries to divide themselves from the rest of Moldova. It is a result of Russian propaganda, but anyway, we have a real problem there. Do you see that in a day when Transnistria returns under control of Chisinau, you would have the population which would be similar in their views to what we have in Gagauzia, or Transnistria would be an easier case for you to deal with?
Well, I don't want to sound overtly optimistic, although you have to be optimistic when you're a politician in Moldova, or quite frankly anywhere. Pessimism doesn't bode well with the voters. But to be totally honest with you, and I can prove that with facts, with numbers. If you look at the previous parliamentary election, the party that I have the honor of representing got 4% in the Gagauz autonomy, while getting 53%, I believe, nationally, and 14% in the Transnistrian region. So just from those numbers, that should tell you that if you open up the political space in the Transnistrian region, if you do away with the controlled media and you open up the public space and you give it a few years, maybe more than a few years, to truly take ownership of democratic processes and free press and freedom of assembly, then I don't see much difference potentially sometime in the future between the composition of the geopolitical preferences of voters in Tiraspol or in Chisinau. Because in Chisinau, things are not rosy either. You have a significant part of the citizens in the capital who are pro-Russian. And we have to work hard to make sure that we can address that and we can better inform them and we can provide them alternatives. Now that we have done away with Russian propaganda, we need to provide them quality content in Russian language that they understand, that they don't end up in a situation of looking for that propaganda online, Telegram, you name it. So with a lot of hard work and some luck, the population in the Transnistrian region, especially in the urban areas, given how anchored they are economically onto the European market, the more they socialize into the European public space, the more this percentage of pro-Russians will decrease. And we have to work hard, not just by engaging our citizens in the Transnistrian region. We also have to work hard with all of our citizens, because you might be surprised, but in the polls that have been carried in Moldova, the most anti-European and pro-Russian region in Moldova was actually the Taraklia district, where the Bulgarian minority lives. And this is quite shocking, because when you have your kin state member of the European Union and NATO, and the Bulgarian community in Moldova is just a sliver, just slightly more anti-European than the Gagauz community is, then you have a problem. And that is a deeply rooted problem, because in Moldovan political system, the left, the pro-Russian left, has taken for granted the votes of the ethnic communities, and the pro-European right, broadly speaking, didn't do enough to work hard with these voters, because if you do a cost-benefit analysis, one Moldovan lei spent for gas and leaflets and effort put in campaigning in Taraklia or Gagauzia, it would be more cost-effective to do it in Telenești or Hei or in Chișinău. And for many years, center-right parties did not do enough to work hard with our citizens who have pro-Russian preferences. Hence the 4% that we got in the Gagauz autonomy. And we have to work a lot harder not to allow for Moldovan ethnic communities to remain on the silver platter for the Russians to exploit, and to antagonize and to weaponize these communities against the center. So this is not lost on us. We try to do our utmost with our modest means to engage, especially now in the context of the EU referendum. We will leave no stone unturned and engage every single citizen in rural areas and urban areas, Russian-speaking, Gagauz, Bulgarian, Roma, to make sure that they know what is at stake in this referendum that we have on October 20th, and to do our utmost to unhook them from this dependency on Russian propaganda that they have been left for many years, largely for no fault of their own, because when you have all the Moldovan media being monopolized by Russian federal TV channels, and Moldovan politicians who pretended to be pro-European were rebroadcasting Russian federal TV stations, were earning handsomely while indoctrinating their own citizens with Russian propaganda. We are still paying the cost of those politically misguided actions in the past 30 years. But we are aware of all those mistakes, and we're certainly not repeating them, and we're working hard to correct them.
Thank you. We definitely need to hear our view of Moldovan expert, let's say, on the same topic. So, Sergio, I would ask you to comment on that. But before that, I would remind, so there are questions. Before I pass the floor here, I would shortly ask Sergio to either confirm or dispute a view of Mihai that Transnistrian population would be ready to turn to pro-European one?
Well, different polls, as Minister was saying, different polls show that there is not a substantial, I think it's in a minor support for reintegration. But that's on the face, and it depends on the polls conducted. If you go into the substance, because the region is a complex one, it's roughly like 30% Ukrainians in rural areas, then 30% Moldovans, mostly also in rural areas, and then you have also industrial settlements with the mostly Russian or Russian field population. So it's a complex area. If you go into the substance of the perception, different social distances or attitudes related to the possible cooperation and communication among the banks, the situation is much better. Like more than 50% would say that they don't see any difficulty or problem to live together along and have various types of communication much closer. But there is another approach to look at this, at the where the different segment of the population sits. Of course, the decision makers, which are more independent, not from the security sector, more independent from the Russian influence, they would be very utilitaristic about reintegration. It depends how much incentives you create to them. And then, of course, if you go into the public sector, if you create them substantial incentives, they would be also willing to buy in that. And then the population is about managing the threats that they have with the process of reintegration. So we have to be really sophisticated and going segment by segment in delivering this message, but I think it is possible.
Okay, thank you. So, please introduce yourself and...
Здравствуйте, можно вопрос на русском? Смогут перевести ваши друзья?
I will translate. Yeah.
Здравствуйте, Василий Костюк, Кишинев. У меня такой вопрос к нашим властям.
A question to our Minister of Foreign Affairs. Why our powers is not included in the foreign list such representatives of Transnistria like Gushan, Smirnov, and I will say why, because many of them are going through the Chisinau but live in German, and I can't imagine that people who are staying in Donbass and fighting in Donbass are against Ukraine could come through Kiev, receive new rules in Moscow, and then go back to Donbass to fight again Ukraine again. Just to understand how to work. It's a question to our representative.
So, why doesn't Chisinau initiate international sanctions against those people ruling in Transnistria, like Gushan, like Krasnoselsky, Smirnov, and so on? This person also suggests that it is due to the fact that these Transnistrian representatives are using Chisinau International Airport to fly to Europe. So. Yeah, Mihai.
Well, I would like to remind that there was a time, a long period of time, where travel bans were in place and it didn't change absolutely anything. For about a decade, there was a travel ban against the leadership of the Transnistrian region, and it didn't move an inch when it came to the negotiation process. I am more of a practical solutions type of guy. The people that were mentioned, they don't really travel. At least I'm not aware of Gushan traveling through Chisinau or Krasnoselsky traveling through Chisinau. Even Ignatiev, who has a criminal case in Ukraine, is saying that he's afraid to come to Chisinau for negotiations because we are going to arrest him on separatist charges. So we are taking actions. The law on separatism is on the books. Travel bans are always an option, but they were in place and they didn't really work, but they are always an option. It's one of those Damocles swords that we have. I wish they could be more effective. Unfortunately, they proved not to be in the past. But there is a lot more other sanctioning mechanism that we can employ with our friends in Kiev, with our friends in Brussels, and we are quite active in using the sanctioning mechanism given the openness of our partners to apply it. And just last week we have seen the United States apply sanctions on the so-called Bashkan of Gagauzia, the governor who actually stole the election with money from the Kremlin and from the oligarch. So the sanctions mechanisms are being used by the Chisinau authorities, and we will not shy away from further employing sanctions mechanisms from whoever goes against stability and undermines Moldova's national security and Moldova's sovereignty.
Okay, thank you. There was a question in this part of the... Is that... In a second row. Sure.
Hi, everybody. My name is...
the mic is behind.
And I have a mic. It's fantastic. Anyway, my name is Thomas Tillesen. I'm from Denmark, but I live in Odesa. I started my business here in 2013 in Lugansk. In 2014 I had to move because Russian soldiers broke into my office. I'm still here, so you can't get rid of me. Anyway, I've been to Transnistrian twice, and it's a shithole. And the former speaker just kind of introduced that by saying that it's criminals. And I don't understand why these criminals are not just basically totally blocked out. I understand you can have some sanctions going on, but it's so easy just to close the border totally on both sides, close down the banking, close down telephone line, close down gas, and offer them two options, either to reunite with Moldova, which would be the wise, or just stop, because we are talking about 2,000 Russian soldiers. It's not going to be a big problem. And I would say, though, that the only problem is these KGB officers or former guys running this country, and you should decide, instead of this long, painful, it's going on for 30 years, just say to them, either guys, we're going to strip you of your assets, or we allow you some kind of amnesty if you introduce yourself to Moldova again, because...
Yeah, okay, thank you. Mihai, again, the floor is yours, but I think that others could comment on that also.
Well, you're right in the sense that the Russian military presence in the Transnistrian region doesn't really pose a significant threat, given that they have not rotated for 10 years. But to have escalatory measures that will disproportionately hurt the average citizens is not something that we can condone, and is not something that we can support. We have to find smart solutions, like it was discussed here, non-trivial solutions, because this is exactly what the Russians want, for us to create escalation, for them to exploit. A humanitarian crisis in the Transnistrian region is in nobody's interest except the Russians. We are committed to maintaining the situation stable and to working hard with our friends and partners to make sure that we do the heavy lifting by incrementally, step by step, meaningfully reintegrating the region. And we are seeing that that strategy is paying off, because economically the region is more and more integrated in Moldova and in the European market. From a military standpoint, the presence there is becoming more and more irrelevant year by year. And the demographic situation is also working in our favor, because the young generation is also more and more aware that the future lies with Europe. The future is in the free world, because the young generation in the Transnistrian region can travel to Moldova, can study and live in Moldova freely. And when they go back to Tiraspol and they see democratic freedoms being curtailed and the Russian model being emulated there, you can understand that they're not big fans of it. So all these big macro processes are working in our favor. So it would be foolish to escalate and to play into the Russian hands, because this is exactly what they want.
Thank you. George, I would ask you to comment. In your intervention, in the first intervention, you mentioned that now you would be able to supply Moldova with energy without Russian input. To my view, going to this scenario also means that, well, sometimes we have to go against what Russia and Transnistria expects, like, for instance, cutting off Russian gas supply or cutting something else. Don't you see that it also is possible? Because sometimes escalation is not something which is definitely negative.
As I mentioned, it's not necessary only to deliver enough gas to Moldova or electricity, but in the same time it's necessary to have a very clear and robust plan at the EU level, and to assure Republic of Moldova enough financial resources to absorb the social shock, as mentioned, Minister. And because it will be very painful when this moment will come to cut the gas from Russia to Transnistria, and to support all is necessary at social level, because, for instance, according to statistics, when the Transnistria will be reintegrated, the number of pensioners will enhance with 25% in the Republic of Moldova. It's necessary to assure enough for Moldova to support, to absorb the social shock, and to support all this social framework.
Painful but needed, or
painful but needed, because otherwise, if you'll have a political change in negative way in Republic of Moldova, if you have something blur on the Ukrainian battlefield, then you have a frozen conflict. And if Moldova will continue to depend on Russian energy, we'll have the same situation, the same blackmail, and it's necessary to cut this link, this Malik link with Russia. But as I mentioned, and I repeat, it's not necessary only to deliver gas, to deliver electricity. It's necessary to have a plan and to support with enough resources Republic of Moldova. And because we have this last minute, it's important, as I mentioned, we can discuss about the successful integration process if the outcome of the Ukrainian war is not in favor of Ukraine. And for this reason, it's not necessary to have a shameful peace agreement. It's not necessary to have another Munich deal. It's necessary to be brave, to be Churchill, not Chamberlain.
Yeah, thank you. So we have 40 seconds left. I think it's high time for me to end up. Yeah,
I will be really brief. Thank you, dear speakers. It was extremely informative. So it is absolutely clear that Kabasna ammunition depot is the common threat not only for Ukraine and Moldova, but for entire EU. And additionally, it is very valuable manipulation asset for Russia. So I have quite naive question. Is there any diplomatic way to force Transnistria demilitarize Kabasna ammunition depot short term? Thanks.
I think Minister again have to answer.
Short term, unfortunately, no. Medium and long term, certainly yes.
Well, with this, we conclude this panel, and let me remind in the very end what I had to do in the very beginning. When we are mentioning Black Sea states, normally people are mention Turkey, Ukraine, Georgia, of course NATO members, Romania and Bulgaria, but let's not forget that Moldova is also a state which has a seaport in Giurgiulești, which is also a Black Sea state. So let's hope, and we not just hope, we believe that one day Moldova will be reunited, Moldova will be reunited on Moldovan terms, and Ukraine would be ready to support our Moldovan friends in this. Thanks to all panelists, thanks to the audience. Yeah, and let me remind to those who are accredited or registered to a side event on Moldova, it is like to the right and downstairs next to the exit from the audience.
The event is about how to stop Russian influence in politics in Moldova, just one level lower. In 3 minutes, it's going to start.
Dear friends, I would like first of all to thank all the panelists and first of all, His Excellency Minister Popșoi. Thank you very much and all the best to Moldova. And thanks for brilliant moderating to Sergiu Sidorenko, Европейская Правда, Eurointegration.com.ua. And my friend,